There's been a lot of research in the psychology community about this question of how is it that you're able to control yourself in situations in which you've already been under a lot of stress. So think about having a hard day. If you have a boss you don't like and that boss is looking over your shoulder all day, and there's all sorts of things you'd love to say to the boss, but any one of them would get you fired. So what you do is you spend the entire day controlling yourself. Now you go home and you may also have to control yourself. Maybe one of your kids is doing something annoying and you have to try and avoid snapping at them, or your spouse or partner says something and you have to avoid snapping at them. Well, it can be very hard to continue that kind of self-control later, and there's a lot of evidence that people may become more aggressive after having a long period of time in which they've had to control themselves. And the question that we were interested in was, is that the same or different as just being tired, as just being fatigued? And it turns out that's a hard question to answer, because in order to answer that question, you have to get a group of research participants who are tired and fatigued. And it's hard to guarantee that you're going to have a group of people like that. But it turned out that UT had an ongoing study in which they were studying fatigue, and we kind of piggybacked on that, where we had a group of people who were staying up for 36 hours, which gave us the opportunity to study the difference between people who were fresh, who'd been up, say, for 8 hours, which is a normal amount of time to be awake, or who'd been up for 30 hours, which is not a normal time to be up, because now you've stayed up for an entire night. And we were able to then look at both a situation in which people were stressed and also one in which they were fatigued. Now, to stress people out, what we did was we used a nice manipulation that's been out there in the literature before, where we had people watch movie clips that were both disgusting and funny. One example of that is there's a classic scene in Monty Python's Meaning of Life where there's a guy who comes into a restaurant and he vomits everywhere. And it's really vile, and at the same time it's hysterical. Now, some people just watched clips like that. Other people watched the clip, and at the same time they were given strict instructions to keep a really neutral face, so not to betray any of what was going on in the film on their face. And they were being videotaped so that they knew that people were going to be able to assess whether they were successfully keeping a straight face or not. That's a really difficult task, and previous work by other people has shown that when people do that very difficult task, if you give them the opportunity to be aggressive later, they actually will be more aggressive than if they just watched the film clip. So we already have this task where we know we can make people more aggressive, and the question is now, what happens when people are also fatigued? What's going to happen in that situation? Well, what we found in this study is, for the people who were fresh, they acted just like the folks in the other studies. That is, the people who were given this very difficult self-control task were more aggressive later when we gave them the chance to do that than the people who didn't do the difficult self-control task. The interesting thing was the people who were fatigued, who'd been up for 30 hours, acted exactly the same way as the ones who were fresh. That is, we didn't see higher levels of aggression in people who were fatigued, and we didn't see any difference in the influence of this self-control task for the people who were fatigued. So what that suggests is that whatever psychological mechanisms are at work in the situation in which people are dealing with stress and then having to exercise self-control later, those processes are not exactly the same thing as what happens when you're just really tired.